newer cavers. I recognize a lot of faces in the crowd here that have probably been caving longer than I have. And waves to Tom's. I haven't seen you in forever, Tom. I miss you. So a lot of people expect me to talk about cave rescue stuff because, you know, you get typecast after a while. But I actually have a lot of other activities and interests that I do aside from cave rescue, in spite of the fact that it's probably one of the biggest portions of my life. So I gave this presentation at Speleo Fest a couple years ago, and I titled it A Caver's Life. A lot of people start caving at various ages in their life. So some people start later in life and they go, wow, I wish I'd known about this when I was younger. And some people, like me, got really lucky. And I actually went into my first cave at like 5 or 6 years old and started actively doing it when I was 13 and pretty much have been actively doing it ever since. So I always like to kind of preface the presentation with that, you know, there are some people out there in the caving community who this has been their entire life. And I'm pretty much one of those people. And then there are other people, you know, they go caving a few times, a couple times a year, and they enjoy it. It's kind of a hobby or an activity. And that's great. To me, you know, it's like hiking or backpacking or bicycling. We all do our own journey. You know, so for me, this has been a life obsession. If it's just a hobby that you enjoy for you, great. I mean, to me, we all share the love of caves and caving. So I'm going to just jump right in and get started since I've got almost all of this stuff in my presentation. And there will be some folks out there in the audience who will recognize a few names and folks in this presentation, especially some from the old days. So I started caving actively in 1983, but there was a little bit of time before then. I'm not exactly sure what age I started in my very first cave, because I live in southern Indiana. There's 4,000 or so caves within about a 50-mile radius of me. And I mean, there was quite literally where I grew up, there was a cave in the woods behind the house. And a nearby state park has this cave in it. And it's an easy, anybody can go into it. It's about 100 feet long and it's a through trip. And, you know, as a little kid, you did it without any lights. It was a lot of fun. I didn't know though, that was going to be something that would become a passion of mine. And of course, living in southern Indiana, school trips and family trips and the like, we went to all the commercial caves that were in our area. Yes, Indiana Caverns exists now, didn't back then though. But I did them all. And my mother hated caving, but my grandmother would take me on these tours there. And then my life changed. I'd like to say for the better. In my 8th grade class, I had a science teacher who took about half the class caving at a nearby local cave you may have heard of called Buckner Cave. Buckner's in Monroe County, Indiana. It's about a 3.5-mile long system, and it is just a neat cave. It also is unfortunately very trashed. It has a lot of garbage and graffiti because Dick Blends worked 2 different jobs and basically didn't have enough time to really manage the cave. And so after the 70s, it really started going downhill. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. But to go caving, my mom borrowed from work a plastic construction helmet. Now, my mom was a librarian. The fact that she had a plastic construction helmet as a librarian was endlessly fascinating to me. And I went down to a local hardware store on downtown Bloomington and bought a plastic Just Right carbide lamp. So some of the old timers in there, I'm seeing the grin on your face there because we know the reputation of the plastic Just Right. And I will say that it was a pretty cool thing. I was always kind of a geek and a nerd, and I liked taking things apart and figuring out how they worked and all that. And so, man, I played with that thing endlessly. Luckily, I didn't burn the house down with it. But I took it and I held it in my hand because the construction helmet didn't have a blade mount. And I carried my spare carbide loose in my pocket. For those of you who are in the younger crowd who may have never heard of carbide, calcium carbide is a chemical that when you react it with water forms acetylene gas, which burns with a really hot flame. And that reaction with water and calcium carbide also is very exothermic. It releases a ton of heat when it reacts, and the byproduct is lime, so it's extremely caustic. The loose carbide in my pocket was okay until we got to the stream passage. This 13-year-old kid ended up having some embarrassing burns in an embarrassing location from that, both chemical and thermal burns. But I was hooked. I really enjoyed doing it. So I'm a voracious reader. I went to the library, checked out all the books that I could. This is pre-Amazon days, so there was actually a building that has a lot of books in it that they will lend you for free if you have a little card. And a couple weeks later, you take the book back and you get some more books. I did that. So I read The Longest Cave, which at the time really it wasn't that old of a publication, about the connection between the Flint and Mammoth systems to form what at the time and still is the longest cave system in the world, at least known and mapped. I read The Caves of Indiana that Dick Powell, Doc Dick, had published in the 60s. Then there was a guy who published something that ended up being the destruction of caves in Monroe County called The Spelunker's Guide to Garrison Chapel Valley. But I read it too. The Boy Scouts even had a spelunking guide, which was actually a pretty good guide. I have a copy of it on my shelf now. And that guide actually for its time had a lot of how to go caving properly. And like many cavers in the mid-'80s, the techniques for doing vertical weren't really well codified yet. The rope manufacturing had just started getting, specifically oriented to caving. So at our local outfitters, I bought a pair of Jumars. And on the pair of Jumars, there was a diagram of how to rig the Jumars up so you could climb a rope. And I was doing some rock climbing at the time, so I had rock climbing books then. But this is what that Jumar system looked like. Notice there's no seat harness. You basically had one sling to each foot, and it went through a chest harness. Well, I was a 14-year-old kid. I was young and strong and didn't weigh that much, so I didn't even have a chest harness. And I was climbing out of the local quarries and cliffs nearby using this system that came with the Jumars. And back then, even in adjusted dollars, is still pretty cheap. Back then, a pair of Jumars was $25 for the pair. And I still maintain to this day that the Jumars were the best ascenders ever made. But we can have those arguments later. But then, I was teaching myself how to do all this stuff. I borrowed my mother's sewing machine and made a seat harness. And that made things a lot easier. So I basically kind of just built climbing systems for rope because at the time there weren't any real publications that showed you how to do this. And I didn't have a mentor at the time. And, like many of us who started in that time period, it's just a miracle we didn't kill ourselves. So a lot of what I teach my students what not to do is what I learned by, the fact that I've managed to survive it. And I'm going to just pause here for just a moment. Power is unstable out here. I've got the generator running. If it kicks off, it'll kick me off maybe, but I'll be back in a minute or two. So just an FYI. So anyway, I was doing a lot of that, teaching myself all of this stuff and just having a grand old time. The Caver's Guide to Caves of Indiana and the Spelunker's Guide to Garrison Chapel Valley. I was going around and going and exploring these caves with some high school friends, like you do. And of course, I was pestering my grandmother to take me to some more of the commercial caves. My mother has always supported my passion for caving. Has never been in a cave. Has no desire ever to go. And but I really thank my mom for helping foster this. So in 1984, I joined the IU Spelunking Club. That's how old it was. My mom had a coworker who was part of it, so I went there, and Kent Wilson and Terry took me to Sullivan's Cave in Lawrence County, Indiana, and it cost us $0.25 to get in. Willie had a little ammo box there. You drive up and you drop your quarters in. I think it was his beer money. The next month, Dr. Norm Pace, a name many of you might recognize, set me up with a couple of cavers to Smallendale Cave and started helping me out learning how to do things properly. I very much credit Dr. Pace for putting me on the right path, the path of righteousness. He invited me to the grotto meetings and some presentations that he was giving and the like, and I was, of course, just absolutely absorbing all of it. I was absolutely hooked. Then I met my first caving mentor, Randy Jackson. Randy Jackson was a local caver who was just doing a ton of caving, usually a trip or two a week. And you know, he could tolerate this obnoxious little kid, and took me to just hundreds of caves over the next couple of years, including my first Speleo Fest. So you know, some pictures of me as a young snot-nosed brat. And that summer, I went on my first tag trip, but somebody might recognize a name or two here. Scott Fee, back when Scott Fee lived up in Indiana before he became the big famous Speleo politician that he is now. We went down to tag, and I rode, it was 4 of us in a compact truck, and 2 of us crammed in the back with all the rope and gear. And I mean, you know, these were the days where you could do that kind of stuff. Now you'd probably be arrested for child endangerment or something. So my first tag pit was a cave in Tennessee called Sinkhole. I actually watched Scott decide he wanted to Tarzan across the bottom of the pit, and he went all the way across and slammed into the wall and broke his clavicle, which put a damper on the rest of the tag trip. The next day, we went and did Valhalla. For those who don't know a little bit of the history there, about that time frame, 2 cavers were killed when a bus-sized rock detached itself from the wall. They were doing everything correct. They were out of the drop zone. You know, they were kind of back up under this ledge, and then that rock decided to let go and killed them both. Of course, I had never, you know, I didn't know anything about that, except there was a memorial plaque at the top of the pit when we got there. And then rescues happen, because when you live in Indiana, there are a lot of rescues because we've got a lot of caves in close proximity to a lot of people. Hundreds of people a week go to Buckner Cave at that time, and there's several other caves that were just getting just lots and lots of traffic. But in this particular cave, a cave in a state park called Spring Mill, has a really fun through trip. The Donaldson-Bronson through trip takes about an hour. It's a very wet trip. You go in the summertime. You don't even bother to wear a wetsuit because you get submerged totally in water for a few hundred feet in the cave, but most of it's just kind of slogging through knee-deep water. It's a fun summer one to do because you come outside and it's a glorious summer day, and you've got a nice warm hike to get back to the car. And of course, back then, this is what we did, is we went on a really long, hard cave trip the day before. Then we would go to Donaldson-Bronson wearing our cave clothes and wash the cave clothes off as we were going through the cave. This, again, mind you, this was what cavers did back then. But this guy, 2 guys actually, got in the cave on 4th of July weekend, and this cave, it drains an extensive area, and it was perfectly clear weather where they were, but about 5 miles away it was thunderstorming, and so that cave flooded, and it floods hard and it floods fast, and so one of them actually got washed out of the cave. For those who are fans of the old television show Rescue 911, this rescue was actually the very first episode of Rescue 911 with Captain Kirk in there. But my grandparents had a farm, like just on the edge of the park, and I happened to see all these cavers that I knew, and so I went over there and saw what was going on, and met Don Paquette and Frank Reed and Sam Fruschauer and those guys as they were running the rescue, and somebody assigned me to help walk the shore of the lake to see if a body had washed out. Luckily, the guy was high and dry on a ledge. It was summer, so the water going through the cave was pretty warm. 3 days later, the water went down enough that they got him out, so happy ending to that one. But wow, that was kind of impressive to me. This big operation. As a kid, I had no idea about somebody could get hurt in a cave, and if you got hurt, what happens? What do you do? I didn't know. But I was also at the same time doing a lot of hiking and backpacking. I was doing it solo, 14, 15-year-old kid going out hiking, backpacking solo. Again, my mom would be in jail if this was today. But I started thinking, what happens if something goes wrong? So I got involved with the Red Cross. We had an explorer group that was working with the Red Cross doing first aid. So believe it or not, and I know this will come as a total shock to some folks who know me well, I was a Boy Scout. I know, the life irony is not lost on many of us. But I spent a lot of time volunteering with the Red Cross, doing first aid stations and the like. And I started really, trying to teach myself as much as I possibly could about wilderness survival and you know, improvised first aid stuff, and just having a glorious time of it. All throughout high school, caving was my thing. Okay, we were going caving 2 or 3 times a week. Randy Jackson worked nights, so it worked out really well. When his weekend was in the middle of the week, so he was up all night. So we would go caving like Tuesday or Wednesday night, get out of the cave at 5 or 6 in the morning, go home, I'd get a shower, I'd drag myself to school, and then pretend to be awake throughout most of the rest of the day. I was going solo caving in Buckner a couple of times a week. You know, again, I'm a kid. And occasionally I'd be spending the entire weekend in the cave. I did a lot of they weren't really rescues, but I did a lot of help of people who were lost in the cave. So I'd come along and find them and direct them the right direction. And about that time, I got to know Frank Reed, and Frank Reed was just one of the most awesome people I have ever known in my life. Taken away from us entirely too early. He helped me with my passion in electronics, and I started caving with him and helping him with radio locations and the like, just was really enjoying knowing Frank. And then there were a few things that happened when I turned 18. I got old enough to take my first orientation to cave rescue. Don Paquette said, hey, this guy's got some talent there, and took this obnoxious little twerp under his wing and started mentoring. I also started, I went through the EMT training, became a full-time EMT. I met a guy who I'm still friends with today, who was my caving buddy for many years, and I met my wife at the time, who also started caving. And then at age 19, I had 3 goals when I got out of high school. One was to become an EMT and work the streets. The other was to buy land and build my house. And the other was to not have to work for a living by the age 30 if I didn't want to. So at 19, I bought a lot of land, and there were several small caves on it. And it's one of the reasons I bought this particular piece of property where I'm sitting here today. It turned out to be the best investment I ever could make. I could never even put that money in the bank and made as much back from that. So by now, I was becoming pretty heavily immersed in cave rescue. I had helped teach at orientations to cave rescue in Central Region. In '92, I went through my first week-long training with the NCRC, and got my instructor in '95. And at that time, we were teaching 4 or 5 orientations to cave rescue in Central Region a year. And in the Southern Indiana area, we were having a rescue a month, and including some pretty serious ones a couple times a year. So that really helped build a lot of skill and cement that in there. Even today, on average, I have caved a couple of times a week. And I stopped keeping a log a long time ago, but I estimate how much caving I've done just based on the fact that it's been pretty steady at a couple times a week. About that time, I got involved with the Xanadu project in Tennessee, just an awesome system. I did about 60 trips over there over about 10 years, and still one of my absolute favorite caves. And then another life-changing event happened. In '94, Frank Reed took me to join the James Cave Project. Okay, this is on the south edge of Mammoth Cave down in Kentucky, and I'd been hearing tales of some really awesome long, hard caving trips, and that's what I like to do. My first weekend with the James Cavers, we went into some virgin cave and a newly discovered cave that they had named Jackpot. So I was hooked with the project. The natural bridge entrance to Jackpot blows a ton of cold air. I mean, it's in this huge sinkhole called Hell's Half Acre that's about a quarter of a mile across and about 150 feet deep. And the entrance is located about 30 or 40 feet off the bottom of the sinkhole. And when you are in the bottom of the sinkhole, you feel the cold air ponded there in the summertime, and you can follow a river of cold air up to the entrance. So we went in, and we found that somebody had been in there previously. We actually found out later that Jim Borden and Don Coons had been in there in the 70s. And so we took this really rusty steel cable that they had left in there, and one of our brave, intrepid James Cavers made it across there, and we rigged a good rope and entered the cave, and we found about 600 feet of cave. The entrance series, about the first 1,000 feet of the cave, is a pretty strenuous cave trip unto itself. The entrance series most cavers take about 2 hours just to do that first 1,000 feet of the cave. Now, those of us who are doing, every other weekend, we're going on 15 or 20-hour jackpot trips. We got it down to a science to the point where we could do that entrance series in about a half an hour. But it's tough. I mean, just most cavers would consider just the entrance series a pretty hard caving trip because you're crawling, you're squeezing, you're on rope, and we rigged a steel cable in there. And it's blowing cold air. In the wintertime, it's sucking ice cold air. There's ice in this crawlway that you see this pack in. It's just an awesome little bit of cave. We found this, in 600 feet of cave, we found this little crack about yay big that was blowing air, a hurricane of air. So we proceeded to enlarge that crack over the next couple of months and got it to the point where that little tiny crack was now this passage that you see here. We call the room that I'm looking at, taking the picture, the exothermic reaction room. We got into just huge passages going everywhere and canyons, and it was freaking awesome. When we went through, the first thing we came to was a place where 5 different passages went off, including one up in the ceiling. We found a couple hundred more feet of cave as we were exploring in there. There's actually even more than that in there, but we didn't know it at the time, and including a fairly deep pit. Now, most of the James cavers at the time were using carbide lamps. I was ahead of the times. I was actually using quartz halogen lights, and I had one of the first ultra bright LEDs that Hewlett Packard put out, those little amber ones that, get about 2 lumens. So we sent Steve Duncan down, and he had a carbide lamp with a flame about that big. And we got about halfway down, and we're like, Steve, what do you see? And he says, dark. Okay, thanks, Steve. We revoked his Virgin Passage pushing privileges until he got a better light. But by the end of that day, we pretty much kind of exhausted most of the easy stuff, but there was the lead up in the ceiling I wanted to check. So I tried climbing it, couldn't get up it. It was all covered with slick snot. Jonathan Schwer tried climbing it. He couldn't get up. I finally hammered a crowbar into some mud, used that as a foothold and made it up. I went down a canyon, came to a cross canyon, looked to this way, there was this big dome pit, looked to this way, and I saw blackness. Even with both my lights on really high, I saw nothing but black. Borehole. I mean, I had been in Virgin Cave in my life up to this point. I had never been into anything like this. Jonathan and I rappelled into this passage and basically, went running down this passage. Yeah, I know, bad form, bad technique. But when I went in, we were so excited, I almost peed my pants. So we decided to name it PYP. And we ran until we got tired, and then we walked. We got to this dome pit that cut the passage. We could see more passage on the other side, but we stopped. We named it We Stop Drop because, none of us are poets. So we went the other direction. And we found another dome pit that kind of blocked the passage. I climbed down this one and found a set of footprints going one direction. That was kind of a mystery. We ended up naming it Mystery Pit. Again, no one in our group has really a lot of imagination there. It took us about 3 weeks to find out that one of our other groups had actually been to the bottom of that around a roundabout way that was incredibly small and incredibly tight and has never been done since. Looked up, saw this huge dome pit, figured he was by himself, didn't want to try and climb it, and went back. So technically, he was the first one in there, but, I claim it. So as we got out of the cave, we relayed our discovery to the rest of the group. And at the time, the James Cave Project, on our project weekends, would regularly have 40 or 50 people there. So we mounted an expedition, and 15 people entered the cave. We dropped all the various drops and found leads going everywhere. I found a crawlway on the other side of Mystery. It ended shortly. And over the next weekends, some other cavers and I bolted our way across We Stop Drop, continued on with the borehole. Unfortunately, almost as soon as it got around the bend, it ended in what looked like valley wall fill. So we built this weird gate for the entrance of the cave, and then proceeded for the next few years to go in the cave, pushing leads all over the place. But we exhausted most of those. And it started getting hard to get people to even come back in because the entrance series was just that hard. But I knew that I had one more lead that I wanted to check. So I started digging on the other end of that crawlway on the other side of Mystery. And Schwer and I finally broke through at one point. We came into a canyon with a several 100-foot belly crawl. We titled Painful Patella, which teed into a larger canyon. And I sat down on a breakdown block in this larger canyon to have a snack. And Jonathan's like, I got to go back. I left all my stuff in my pack back at the dig because he was using carbide at the time. I really didn't want to. And so we ended up going back and, doing the right thing. And I wasn't able to go the next project week because of NCRC. And that's, of course, where the group climbed just above where I was sitting and broke into this huge borehole passage. And Drew and Jonathan and Chris went running down it. I know, bad cave conservation there. And we had found the celestial borehole. So that next week, a large expedition was mounted to go in. We stopped where they went. We flagged a very narrow trail through the cave, trying to figure out where they had put their footprints. And it ended about 5,000 or so feet later in a large dome pit that we named El Jefe. Going the other direction, it added about another 1,000 feet. So we had a little over a mile of incredibly beautiful borehole passage. So the bottom of El Jefe is about a 65-foot pit with about another 100 foot of dome above it. And at that point, we actually figured out that we had crossed underneath Mammoth Cave National Park boundary. So we contacted the national park, showed them the pictures of what we found, and worked out with them access. They basically said, well, we don't have an entrance on it. So they allowed us to continue. But one of the neat things about the El Jefe pit was there are all these stylolites all over the wall. And I mean, they're just layer after layer of these stylolites, pretty good examples of stylolites. Some of the passage, you have to jump back and forth across these canyons, so we rigged some ropes. There's just a ton of gypsum crust in there. This is an area of the passage we titled the Toasted Marshmallows. The anastomoses are just beautifully brown and white with the gypsum crust. And we have probably outside of, there's a couple other places in the Mammoth area that have gypsum this nice, but pretty much in the Midwest, this is about as nice a gypsum as you're going to find. And at one point, it was almost like walking on really cold frozen snow. The little path that we have, you're just crunching the gypsum crystals. And as we were going through there, we're trying to take the nicest ones and set them off the side of the path. But there's even a few of these clear, mirabolite, or sorry, selenite, not really exactly sure, but just beautiful formations. And there are gypsum tusks in here that are over 2 feet long. So then there's a lead off of the middle of the celestial borehole, a 400-foot tight belly crawl we can name True Grit because it was gypsum sand, and that stuff gets in your clothing and it just chews the living crap out of everywhere your clothing is rubbing. When we came out the other side of True Grit, it opens up into another huge passage with leads going everywhere. I now actually own the property that's above that section of the cave, and we spent a lot of time playing in there. We could hear this huge waterfall thundering off in the distance. And it was this huge pit we named Coldwell. We spent the next 2 or 3 years doing a lot of exploration. We ended up connecting into the Martin Ridge and Wig Pistol system. It was actually the Martin Ridge cavers connected into us, but they didn't tell us they'd done it until we found the connection from our side. But this was our map. It was about 3.5 miles of cave, including the celestial borehole. And then this is the Martin Ridge Wig Pistol system, and this is our portion of the cave. At the time, there was about 35 miles of cave, and at the time it was the 9th longest cave in the U.S. So it was a pretty significant system there. And for those who are familiar with the work of Dr. Quinlan, he was instrumental in getting the Wig Pistol system surveyed. We had a place in there that we called Overlook Avenue. And it's a really neat passage, but there was fascinating feature in Overlook Avenue. This purple stuff. No idea what it was. At first, the geologist in me said, well, it's probably some kind of mineralization. And then we started noticing that it was, this purple stuff was developing on any substrate. It was on limestone, sandstone, mud, rope. So it clearly was biological. However, before I could even find out what it was, we lost access to the cave because of a landowner change. So it was a crushing blow to me. I'd spent a couple of thousand hours in Jackpot at that time. But, I'd been working with the James Cave Project for several years now, so we started doing a lot of caving back in James and Coach. And James Cave is kind of fascinating. It's about 13 miles of cave under about 35 acres of land. It's a 3D maze, and it has approximately 10 times the passage density of anything in that region. And you spend most of your time on rope when you're in this cave. So you do a ton of rope work. And at no point in the cave are you more than 400 or 500 feet from any other point in the cave, but it might be 6 or 7 hours to get there. So this is just a close-up of the top side of the cave. I showed this to Tom Bemis there, and he shows me the picture of that potash mine that he has over in New Mexico. But, for a cave, this is incredibly mazy. And this is just one layer of the cave. Coach is also kind of mazy. It has a tourist section of the cave, but it's got really just one crawlway, but that crawlway is about 2 miles long. And some of the hardest caving I've ever done in my life has been in Coach. Both are graybat hibernaculum. They have the most significant graybat hibernacula in the U.S. And in 2015, Kristen Bobo and her team found Native American petroglyphs in Coach 100 feet from the entrance in a place that we had just been going by for years. They found this turkey or buzzard, not really exactly sure what it is. And they found what they call the toothy grin, which indicated a Native American burial. And James had been commercialized, and they had actually found skeletons of 2 Native Americans in there that they, this was back in the 60s, they put them in glass display cases on the tourist trail. The remnants of those have been repatriated. We also, during that time, worked very hard on a 25-year-old dig project that was sat right in between Coach and James, because both of those are only about 100 feet apart. We're hoping to connect the 2 of them. We found significant caves. There's major airflow going out of there, but we still were never able to connect the 2. And I lost the air in this large breakdown room. Fun stuff. Meanwhile, I was developing a career in cave rescue. I became the Central Region Coordinator in 1999, and I really kind of just dove headfirst into NCRC. It just became my life. I also bought a cave pack manufacturing company, Lost Creek Packs. I really had been using Lost Creek Packs for years, really liked the product, and at the time, there really weren't many alternatives. My very first cave pack were those old Army gas mask packs you could get for $1 at the surplus store. And I built the pig, which was the 2 Clorox bottles that you cut the bottoms off of and stick them together. When I got my first Lost Creek pack from Tom Frisch, man, I was styling. In 2005, we formed the Richard Blenz Nature Conservancy to manage Buckner Cave. Dick Blenz was starting to get older. We really got control of access to the cave and started restricting who could go in. We were allowing people to go in, but we were making sure that they had proper equipment. We're going to respect the cave. I had been doing a weekly trip every Monday night since '99 on top of the other trips that I was doing in the cave, and which I still do. And at one point in 2010, I estimated that just in Buckner alone, I've crawled over 800 miles in my life. I figure I'm now probably about halfway across the United States just by crawling. And then life changed again. 2007, we regained access to Jackpot. First thing I went and did was go back in and collect some samples of purple stuff for Diana Northup. My wife is a microbiologist, and we were able to collect good samples. Unfortunately, Diana never had a chance to get these analyzed, so I still, to this day, and wondering what this purple stuff is. I mean, it's clearly a microorganism that's probably eating methane and hydrogen sulfide out of the atmosphere, but I've studied it pretty extensively, but we've never been able to culture it. So if any of you all know a good microbiologist out there who wants to take on a project, I've got one out there. Yes, I've talked to Hazel a couple of times. She didn't seem to be all that thrilled about it. So it is what it is. So I started doing a systematic inventory of the cave leads, starting from the entrance of the cave. This is on the other side of We Stop Drop. This is where it ended in the breakdown that was up against the valley wall. Except that we found out that when we mapped it and did the topo overlay, it wasn't actually in the valley wall, it was in the middle of a saddle of a ridge. So I started digging because it was moving air. It was a spooky, spooky dig because every time you'd move a rock, the entire pile would shift. So we utilized a lot of Papa Nobel's magic elixir so we could remove rock from a remote location. Persistence paid off though. We found more borehole. So I named the new section of borehole the Nobel Prize, kind of a multiple pun in there. And even to this day, we still, only one person at a time goes through that section of crawlway through the breakdown because it's still pretty spooky. So when we came into this passage, the character of the cave changed yet again. We actually found these huge rimstones, and there's a section of it that has a bunch of snowballs. You can see the snowballs up in the ceiling there. So not a super, super common gypsum type formation. I know Mr. Bemis there is probably chuckling a little bit on the fact that, you know, his cave probably has quite a few of those. But, you know, for where we are, they're not super common. And these really nice series of rimstone dams in there. Just a beautiful section of passage, including some pristine mud cracks. And an unfortunate bunny who fell in a dome pit that we are still working on pushing leads in there. It just amuses me that you can still see the outline of the rabbit. However, this time it did end in the valley wall. And, however, it was on Park Mammoth property. Not Mammoth Cave National Park, but Park Mammoth, our landowner for the James Cave project. And we had very friendly landowners for Park Mammoth. They said if it had to do with the caves, as far as they were concerned, it was our baby. So we started digging from the inside, trying to find our way out. Couldn't do that, so we got serious. And we spent the next 2.5 years. Basically, we did a radio location. I taught a couple of the project members how to make a cave radio locator. We were over breakfast one morning with some diagrams on napkins and vague hand waving. And we did this radio location and started digging. We basically tunneled our way down through 43 feet of solid rock and finally broke in. It took 2.5 years. We basically pulled out what we consider probably a triaxle load of gravel out of there. We used it to pave the road to go up to that particular section of the cave. And the day we broke through happened to be the same day that the Chilean miners who had been trapped in the gold mine, the first day they'd made contact with them. So this is a picture from inside the cave. I actually have some video of the drill bit. I don't have it here in this presentation, but I have video of the drill bit breaking through. And so the crew that had been inside the cave had been in for several hours. So we actually played Chilean miner and we're dropping candy bars down to them through the drill hole. That's a 10-foot piece of drill steel. We ended up lining the cave entrance with some pipe. We built ourselves a little bunker on the outside so we could, since this was virgin rock that we went through, we wanted to make sure we could airlock it and maintain the airflow in the cave. So we built the bunker and the airlock. Put this nice little gate on it, landscaped around the area again, and now it's what I like to call the Hogan's Heroes entrance. But finally, I could get back to exploring the cave after spending 2.5 years of just trying to put this entrance in. I pushed a bunch of stuff in there, found a whole bunch of more new stuff. We found this one really large room, one of the largest rooms that I've been in east of the Mississippi, other than, say, in Rumbling Falls or the caves in that area. But I called it the Hershey Room because at certain times, this room will fill up with 20 or 30 feet of water that's ponded, deposit its load out there, and leave all of this really nice melted chocolate all over the everything that makes just fun glop to go through. I was looking down a drill hole from a drip in the chocolate there. Hard to get a good picture of this room, but I'm on one end of the room and I'm about 150 feet elevation up, and there on the other side, about 600 feet away, is another crew up on a breakdown or on a mud choke slope. Just some neat stuff in there, very well decorated alcove in there. Looking out from that nicely decorated alcove. John All, who owned the property above Coldwell, part of Jackpot, wanted to finance a trip to go to Everest. And so he contacted me because he knew I wanted to buy the property. So I bought the property. About that same time, the 2015 National Seminar for the NCRC was at Park Mammoth Resort, and we used James and Coach and some of the smaller caves on the property. James was such a neat cave that at one point we had the entire class, all 4 levels in the class, working in the cave in different locations in the cave. None of them were more than 5 minutes travel time from the entrance where we had the porta-john set up, and we never saw each other. So it's just that much of a maze in there. After the seminar, we led some trips in James and Jackpot. Had a lot of fun with that. Got to show off our baby. With the last couple of years, we've been working on an entrance from our new property into Coldwell. Once I get that entrance in, it'll actually go through a little bit of a crawlway, but I will own, well, I own now, but I will own an entrance to a 145-foot deep pit, one of the 3rd or 4th deepest in Kentucky. To get to the dig face from the inside, you actually have to negotiate 6 separate ropes that are all within hearing distance of each other. We have had the original entrance, the natural bridge entrance. The landowner has occasionally let some local, I want to say, quote unquote, cavers. So they have actually been, there's been some vandalism and damage to the cave that they've gone off the trail. They've left graffiti in the cave. But nothing we can basically do about it since the landowner's letting them in. We are still working in Jackpot. There are many active leads in dig. Basically, our biggest problem is we have more stuff to do than we have people to do it, because everything we do in James and Coach and Jackpot is pretty technical. So people have to have really, really good vertical skills and just be good, competent, solid cavers, because there are many places, speaking as a rescue professional, if you're not getting yourself out, you're not getting out. So if it's not a self-rescue, we would try our best, but it's just going to be very difficult if possible at all. I've put almost a mile of rope in Jackpot. I've got, at this point, I now have almost $2,000 in rigging hardware in the cave. It cost us about $8,000 to put the Thunder Valley entrance in, and with the whole crew of people doing it, it took a couple of thousand people hours. Somebody asked, well, why didn't you just get a well or a drilling rig in there and just put an entrance in that way? And believe me, we thought about that, but we could not. This is 2 miles back into the back beyond. There's some very rugged terrain. We could not get a driller to do that. So we did it literally by just hand drilling and blasting. So this is, and we finally published a nice map of the cave. This is not the complete map because we have since found more stuff in there that's not on the map. We entered it in the, I want to say the 2014 or 2015 cartographic salon. I think we got an honorable mention, but this was the project's first really good experience trying to put a good map out there. 2016, the James Cave Project Incorporated. I'm actually the membership officer for the James Cave Project. The James Cave Project is the 2nd longest continuous cave project in the United States. So, after 60 years, I guess we're not going anywhere. And we have lots and lots of caves to be done in the project. The cool part is that we can, from ridge walking on the surface to, to stuff in the cave, we can accommodate pretty much any level of caving skill, from beginners to highly experienced folks, people who like digging, people who like mapping. There's archaeology to be done. There's biology to be done. This is just a ton of great stuff in there. The project, most of the major holiday weekends except Christmas and New Year's, we have project weekends. We also have them throughout other times of the year. Just recently, our landowners went bankrupt, and the property got split up and sold off. But luckily, the Nature Conservancy had bought the land above the James and Coach area, and the James Cave project is actually written into the Conservancy that manages the property. So as long as we have James Cave Project incorporated, we will still have access to the caves. But it's the new landowners. We met the new landowners. They seem to be very friendly. So we're hopeful that that we'll be able to continue on with the entire property. Of course, you know, I'm still involved in a lot of other projects with there. In 2013, I sold Lost Creek Packs. I kind of spent a year bumming around, not actually being employed. I teach EMT at Indiana University. I'm an adjunct professor at Ivy Tech. I teach how to be an adult. It's college student success, but it really is how to be an adult. I still have a lot of irons in the fire. I've got NCRC. I'm actually in about a month and a week will be my last term as the national coordinator. I've done 12 years as national coordinator. It's time to let somebody else do it. So in our meeting in February, we'll elect somebody who I hope will carry on and probably do a better job than I did. I also work as a risk management coordinator for IU Recreational Sports. I supervise 20 or 30 EMTs and paramedics, basically make sure our patrons stay safe. As David mentioned, I'm the editor and contributing author to the Manual of U.S. Cave Rescue Techniques. I've helped out with several of the cave projects, including the Fisher Ridge Project. I came down to play in Tom's backyard there for a little while with John Punches and Stan, and helped write the rescue pre-plans for Lech. Went out to the Ohms stomping grounds out in Wind and Jewel and helped write the pre-plan for there. Still caving weekly at Buckner. It's my Monday night thing. I've taught at over 125 cave rescue seminars and have been on over 100 real rescues, including some pretty serious ones. I like to say, I had a lot of help getting started with these things, and I like to pay this forward. I take a lot of new people caving. One of the things that we do on the Monday night Buckner trip is it's open for anybody to come, and if they want to learn how to cave, I will teach people how to cave. And we have, over the years, we've had many people who've learned, not just how to go into a cave, but learn all sorts of how to survive in the cave, how to avoid having to be rescued in the cave. So Buckner is a great laboratory for that. I had a lot of people, Marion Smith, Sam Fruchauer, Don Paquette, Frank Reed, they helped me out when I started. Marion and Sam are still active caving. Don would be an active caver, but he's got some health issues that have kind of knocked him out of it the last year or so. Personally, I hope to have another 30 or 40 years caving. This is my 38th year caving, and you do the math, a couple trips a week on average times 38 years, 3,500 to 4,000 cave trips in my life. I'd like to do more of that. I say that to Marion, and he just looks at me and says, "Oh, that's cute. You're just getting started." So I'd like to thank the folks who did some photo credits there, especially some of the stuff when I was an obnoxious little twerp. Now that I'm an obnoxious old twerp, I take most of my own pictures. There have been a bunch of people who helped me over the years, aside from those that I mentioned. Caving, yes, this was my story in caving, but caving is a community, and all of our stories overlap in many, many different ways. And, several of the people in the audience there are people who my stories overlap with their story. And I have to say that for the most part, I've just thoroughly enjoyed the time I've spent with almost all the cavers I've known over the years. We do have the lost friends who are no longer with us. But that is part of life. And I think if we've led a good life, and caving has been a part of it, that can't be too wrong. So that's what I've got. Went a couple minutes over my 45 minutes, but I'll be happy to answer a couple of questions in there.
Thanks so much. That was awesome. Very thoroughly enjoyed that. My daughter's favorite part was the bear with the first aid. My 5-year-old daughter really enjoyed that teddy bear wrapped in first aid. I had a question. You had mentioned the purple deposits, and if anyone knows any microbiologists, cave microbiologists, do you know Dr. Nirawat Cheaptham? She's a Canadian cave microbiologist. Are you familiar with Dr. Cheaptham?
I'm not.
I used to work at a provincial park up in Canada, and she is a cave medical microbiologist, and I bet she'd probably be interested in looking at your samples. Would you want me to try to email her or connect you?
All right. Hook us up.
Will do. She has a really fun book about cave microbiology. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I found it in the Carlsbad Ranger Library about a year ago, and I was flipping through it, and I found a picture of myself in it. It was just the back of my helmet, but I could tell my hairline, and I worked at the park it was taken in, so that was pretty fun. So yeah, Dr. Cheaptham, I'll send her an email and see if I can connect the two of you.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Is there any questions from anyone else? I'm sure there are.
I'm going to also make a plug here. The James Cave Project is publishing our history of the James Cave Project through the NSS. It should be out in a month or two. So if you want to read all about it, it's a pretty fascinating read overall. If I do say so myself.
I know, I'll check it out. Well, I'll ask a question. What's one of your most memorable rescues?
So when I tell my EMT class that, that's one of the questions that you will get as an EMT is that, what's the worst thing you've ever seen or whatever. And you have to come up with a stock answer, because the things that are actually like the most significant to you are really not things that lend themselves really well to share. But I do have several really good stories. One of them is we had what I call a twofer. Okay. So I had a young lady in Buckner who slipped off about an 8-foot ledge. She fell just wrong and she ended up fracturing her pelvis. Luckily, she only weighed about 80 pounds, and so it really was pretty easy to get her out. Very painful for her. When we got her out and they got her in the hospital, they found out her pelvis was fractured in 3 separate places. She had a rod put across the pelvis and one across one side in the back of the pelvis. And about 3 weeks after all the surgeries, they did a pregnancy test on her and found out that she was about 6 weeks pregnant. And of course, any woman of childbearing age goes into the ER, they give a pregnancy test automatically, but she was too soon to show up on a pregnancy test. So she had had medications, she had had anesthesia, she'd had surgery, all this stuff, and she was pregnant. And that's pretty significant. Luckily, when the child was born, it was born without incident, and she's 7 or 8 years old now and perfectly normal. So yay for that one. But that was not only did we go in for one, but we rescued 2. But that was also the lightest patient I've ever carried out of a cave. So, at that point, it was probably not even the size of a jelly bean. And then I had my second twofer. And this one, kind of funny, kind of tragic at the same time. We had a guy who he had several brushes with the law over his life. Living in his mom's basement, was 35 years old, had walked from one town to a nearby town to visit his grandfather in a nursing home. The nursing home was right near one of the most popular caves in Lawrence County, Indiana, Dog Hill Donahue. And it was a big culvert entrance right off the side of the highway. And his cell phone stopped pinging in that area. He'd been missing for 3 days. So we got called, and I'm thinking to myself, he probably got hit by a car on his way home or picked up, or whatever. Somebody who's had that many brushes with the law probably knows a lot of not so great people. But, you know, we got asked to search the cave, so we went in to search the cave. I really wasn't expecting to find him in the cave. And we got in a couple thousand feet into the cave, and all of a sudden I heard voices. Oh, hey, cool. When I got up to them, there were two of them. There was him and his girlfriend. They'd been in the cave for 3 days. They had used their cell phone for light. Had gotten a very long ways into the cave using their cell phone. Dropped the cell phone, broke it. We're out of light. They had 2 lighters with them. Exhausted both those lighters trying to get out. Now, okay, that's all good and fine. But the sad part was when we got to them and I'm talking to them, I'm giving them some food and water and warming them up. The lady asked me, "What day is it?" I said, "Oh, it's Friday." And she goes, "Oh, I get paid today." I'm like, "You have a job?" "Yeah." She has a 12-year-old child as well. She's been missing for 3 days, has a job and a 12-year-old child, and nobody reported her missing. I don't know what that says about, you know, whether you just, is this like, do you do this all the time? Or is it just nobody cares about you to the point where you could go missing for 3 days and nobody would say anything? So anyway, we got them out, and I mean, you know, there are times in rescue I feel really, really good. That twofer with a mother and her unborn child, I felt really good about that one. This one, you know, at that point, I kind of felt like we were working against natural selection. But, you know, we do what we do. And about 6 months later, our local congressman decided he wanted to honor all of the heroes who performed that rescue. So I have a congressional plaque that basically says, "You did a great job, Anmar. Thank you for being a good citizen." And of course, the local congressman spelled my name wrong, so which is also goes. So anyway, there's your 2 fun rescue stories.
Thanks for sharing. Those are great. Any other questions? It looks like Larry's saying something.
Can't hear you, Larry.
I guess it's not working.
Now I hear
We
you.
hear you now.
Do you have any remembrances of the Emily Davis Mobley rescue and let you get?
So I was not on that rescue. That was 91. And other than the
that's
fact
nice.
that when we went in to do the rescue pre-plan, we took a look at where Emily had her issue and planned for that area, and actually came up with what I just consider just some absolutely slick rigging to do very small party rescue to get somebody out of that area and up into the rift. We tested it the next year and it worked even better than we'd originally intended. So, but I will say, for those who've never read it, one of my favorite mystery authors, murder mystery authors, Nevada Bard, did Blind Descent. And she did a pretty credible job of describing, you know, up until the point where the murder happens, describing the rescue techniques that would have been used in that time frame.
Anmar, just a great program. Thanks. Really enjoyed it. Since no one is asking the obvious question that always gets asked if you're working around Mammoth Cave, how close are you to connecting, Jackpot, Martin Ridge, Wig Pistol to the mother system?
So there's where the Hershey room is in Jackpot is a very deep valley called Woolsey Valley. And on the other side of Woolsey Valley is an extension of Mammoth. So, I mean, we're probably half a mile to 3/4 of a mile away, but we would need to go very, very low to get underneath it. And we're already deep in the system. So probably not going to happen, at least from a human being standpoint. But hydrologically, our water is going in there.
Yeah. Quinlan's tracing showed that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone?
Hi, this is Ellen. I had a question. Is there anything you carry now in your pack, like that you always carry, learned, like having it, that might surprise us?
So actually what might surprise you is that I actually don't carry all that much in my pack. Here's the thing. And when I'm teaching our new people caving, I really emphasize that what they need to carry, anytime you're going into a cave. But most of the time when I go caving, if it's 2 or 3 hours and it's a cave that I'm very familiar with, I've got snacks in my pocket. I've got plenty of light sources with me. I might stick a water bottle in my pocket or something, but I'm oftentimes not carrying a pack. Now, if I'm going caving on a long trip, if I'm going to go caving 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 hours, then I'm actually carrying a lot of stuff. But one of the things that we, in our NCRC level 3 class, they talk about, and they do a pack dump and they talk about the various things you might carry for self-rescue and the like. They talk about what they call your comfort item. That's something that really isn't necessarily all that practical, but that just, you take comfort from having it. For some people, it might be a little stuffed toy or something like that, or, some kind of talisman symbol. I actually don't have anything like that. But what I do emphasize to people is that knowledge of how to do things, how to improvise, how to avoid problems can't get lost, but your pack can get lost. So while I'm not saying don't carry plenty of good stuff in your pack, I always emphasize to people, try to get as much training in as broad a category as you possibly can, because that, first off, it doesn't weigh anything. And second off, it'll get you out of trouble a lot more times than just having, that extra little piece of gear.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Okie dokie.
All right, well, thanks. You've been great, and have a great rest of your meeting there, and I'll see you all, hopefully see some of you at convention.
It sounds wonderful. Thanks
Cool.
again. That was great.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. Moving on to the meeting. I'll click share screen. Bring up my PowerPoint. That picture that I forgot to take off that sound effect, that annoying sound effect. All right, that picture that you see, that's when Mr. Mirza was interviewed for the Thailand cave rescue. If you look up articles about the world famous Thailand cave rescue of the soccer team, you'll find probably a good number of articles that are just featuring Anmar Mirza, because news folk just wanted to talk to an experienced cave rescue about details of it. I had included an article that I had sent out in the email that was about that. Just a reminder for any younger folk, there's a discount rate for the National Speleological Society. I wanted to share this postcard that was sent. Dave Jackson sent it to my address, but it is to the entire grotto. Happy New Year, Pecos Valley Grotto. Thank you so much for your generous support of our work with CaveSem. So I appreciated Dave Jackson sending off that family holiday card to our grotto. You don't need to read all of this, but I just wanted to put this in as a reminder. This was an email from Sonia that was sent out, that the National Speleological Society is looking for volunteers that want to help. If you don't have this email, I can forward it to you. Bit of a grainy picture, but I thought I should include that the USA Cave Animal of the Year for 2021 is the cave ground beetle. I threw this in there because I did a talk for a high school biology class in New York, but there were like 6 periods of the class, so I did it 6 times throughout the day. It's just a 20-minute talk. Since it was a biology class, I did just a 20-minute talk on biospeleology, and they recorded it, put it on their YouTube video. So then that's one thing I did to contribute to cave research or cave education this month. That was a fun day. There's a scholarship for any karst science, the Wilson Scholarship. So there's information available for that if anyone's interested in looking into that. I'm sure George will be able to touch upon this a lot more than I will be able to, but coming up is the opening ceremony for the International Years of Cave and Karst, January 26th. Any other news from anyone?
Well, since you mentioned the International Year, welcome everyone to the International Year of Caves and Karst. I had a meeting today reviewing the opening ceremonies of what we're doing. It's being recorded. Trying to do something live with 24 time zones around the world just isn't going to work. So anyway, it's looking really good. It will go live at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. So looking, for example, at Carol on the East Coast, it'll be 9 local time for her, Eastern time zone. 3 o'clock in the afternoon Central Europe time. That actually turns out to be the best time relative to catching everyone awake within that calendar day. But anyway, so the presentation is going to be an hour long. We're setting something up that hasn't been announced yet, where we'll likely provide a link in the chat. It'll be on YouTube. We'll provide a link in the chat at the end, where those who want can click on the link, go to a Zoom address that I've set up today, and then just a 5-minute virtual toast, from around the world for the International Year for those who want to do that. So anyway, that's it's exciting. I encourage everyone to do what they can to get involved, organize activities. Dave, for example, the lectures you gave, if those are public education and those are publicly available, put them on the website for the International Year. Make people aware of them. We're trying to reach the world, and that's part of it. You don't need, some people, even though we try to make it clear that you don't need any official permission to be part of the International Year, some people still contact me daily asking, do I have permission, to use the logo? Do I have permission to do this? Just run with it. We want to make it as simple as possible. So we upgrade the website. If you go to the events section of the website, we've changed it so that there's announcements of events, but now we have event results. And I think there's like 5 or 6 items in event results. And so Dave, you could put your lectures under event results, and just follow the simple format there, and then the links to the lectures. So there's a couple of things that happened, for example, on the Explorers Club that you can go watch. That happened last week. There was an op-ed in the New York Times that's listed from Mike Taylor. A couple of things from Italy. Their International Cave Beetle of the Year. So, and the National Park Service is very involved in setting up events from for the parks around the country. Dan, I didn't see Dan on the call, but he's been working closely with the NPS team on the International Year.
He's caving right now.
Oh, okay. And also, if anybody's checked out the NICRI website or Facebook page, I need to send some media stuff out about this. But the mayor of Carlsbad has recognized the International Year by the city in a proclamation. He's issued a proclamation that I encourage other people in other communities that if they have contacts with their local mayors, representatives, governors, I'm working to see if I can get something from the governor, a proclamation from the governor for that New Mexico recognizes the International Year. But all of that will result in additional PR publicity. Um, so anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. And just to close that out, at least from what I've got to say, is that, you know, I've been caving 46 years, and I've rarely, I think most cavers I've met I've heard them complain at one point or another that why do we have these problems? Why aren't caves being protected? Why aren't the laws better? Why isn't there more money for research? Why isn't there this? Why isn't there that? Well, if we don't do it, if we don't step up and make things possible, then who will? And the International Year is designed to educate the world, including lawmakers, including the educated who aren't educated about karst. So anyway, it's up to us to make this happen. We've got a lot of partners who aren't cavers, and that's good. We need to reach those folks. So whatever you can do, please do. Don't be shy, and post your events, your announcements, and results, you know, on the website. You know, no event is too small. Anyway, but that's it from me on the International Year, unless anybody has any questions on it.
All right, thanks so much, George. Does anyone have any questions? I will mention that talk I did for that biology class I was connected with them because of the National Speleological Society. I mentioned during the last meeting the Speleo Guest program that Devra, the Chief of Education with the NSS, has set up. So that's how I got connected with the biology class. So anyone can do that. If anyone wants to get involved with reaching out to classes, just contact Devra and you can get signed up for the Speleo Guest program. It's a lot of fun. Any other news from anyone? Caving news at all? We'll move on to the Treasurer and Secretary reports. Before we begin the Treasurer report, I will mention, Phyllis, it is in the mail. I don't know if it's arrived at your house yet, but I do apologize dearly that the auction money that was handed to me took so long for me to get in the mail to you, but it is sent off to you, what was given to me, as well as my dues from the auction. So moving on to the Treasurer report. You there, Phyllis?
We're not hearing you, Phyllis. Phyllis, we don't hear you. You're not muted. I'm not sure what the problem is. Try muting and unmuting yourself. See if that fixes it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. I see your mouth moving and it doesn't show a mute option, but yeah, we're...
Okay, Phyllis, I just muted you. So try unmuting yourself and see if that works.
Maybe the microphone on your computer is off, possibly. Worst case scenario, Phyllis, if you can't get it to work, you could just type the Treasurer's report into the chat screen if you can't figure out what's going on. Why don't we
when we started the meeting, before everyone signed on, we could hear Phyllis because we had a little discussion for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I remember that. That's
So
interesting.
there's currently an ongoing known issue with Windows where sometimes the microphone cuts out due to background noise suppression. So you can usually fix it by talking loudly very close to the microphone.
Huh. Well, why don't we do the secretary's report? And yeah, Phyllis, if you can't figure it out, maybe just type it into the chat area. Oh, looks like you did. I see it there. $2,098.98 in the bank, $55 cash with a very generous donation from Kelly. Oh, cool. Wonderful. And yeah, like I said, there's some auction cash from Kelly Holiday. There's some auction cash coming in the mail, so that number will be bigger next meeting. Moving on to the secretary report. Is Andy on? I do know this will be Andy's last, I think last meeting as secretary, because he's not here anymore. He moved away. He sent me a message saying that he was going to be late at the beginning of the meeting, but I am not seeing his name on the participant list, so I'm guessing that Andy is not on. Colin's was filling in. Colin, were you on the last meeting last month?
Yeah, I was. I don't take really great notes about what we did. I know Dave Jackson, he was the speaker and talked about stuff, Cave Sim.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a wonderful talk. Yeah, Dave Jackson. Does anyone have anything else they want to mention about last month's meeting since our secretary wasn't able to make it tonight for a recap? Okay. And yeah, nominations for officers are tonight, so we'll cover that in the new business. Okay. Old business. Is there any old business that anyone would like to address? All right. If anyone thinks of any old business that they would like to address, don't hesitate to bring it up. New business. Is there any new business anyone would like to address? All right, then we'll move on to nominations. I suppose we'll start with the chairman nominations. I would like to nominate Gabe for chairman for the upcoming year. Is there anyone that would second that nomination?
Second.
Second.
And
Second.
Gabe, would you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will accept it.
Okay, are there any other?
I appreciate the seconds.
Any other nominations for chairman from anyone? Okie dokie. So next month we'll be voting, and if anyone does want to nominate anyone prior to voting next month, that is acceptable. So we'll move on to vice president. Are there any nominations for vice president for 2021?
Can you nominate someone who's not on the call?
I see no reason why not.
Faz and I were thinking about nominating Dwayne while he's not here to defend himself.
Yeah, we could
Have
nominate.
to be NSS members.
He is.
Yeah.
Paid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming he's paid up, but he has been in the past.
Because of course, nominations can take place next month too. So if he decides to decline the nomination between now and then that's fine. So I see no reason why we could not nominate him. So I will second that nomination for Dwayne as vice president. And he's not here to object, so we'll have him on the nomination list.
That offer the tradition that you better show up when nominations and elections occur, otherwise you will be elected.
Yeah, really.
So,
True.
Any other nominations for vice president?
Maybe consider Michael Moffett if he's interested in that. He seems to be pretty active, and I've gone caving him with him a good couple of times. I think he'd be a good fit.
So is this Gabe, is that an official nomination for Michael Moffett?
Might as well, yeah.
So yeah, same thing. I don't think, well, actually he messaged me asking for the link at the beginning and I sent it to him.
I
he's on
got
the
it.
call.
I'm
Oh,
on it.
there he is. Is there anyone that wants to second the nomination for Michael Moffett for vice president?
I'll second.
And Michael Moffett, do you accept your nomination?
Surely.
Okay. Okay, so we have
I guess
Chairman.
Dwayne's off the hook then.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what next month brings, I guess. But moving on to any other nominations for vice president? Okay. Moving on to secretary. I would like to nominate Colin Wallfield for secretary. Is there anyone that wants to second that nomination?
I second that.
A lot of seconds.
Okay.
Colin, do you accept the nomination for secretary?
Sure.
Okie dokie.
Colin, you really impressed everybody with your reading of the notes today, obviously.
Oh, good. I try very hard.
And he wasn't even acting as filling in last month. Our secretary was on last month, so just good job remembering, Colin.
Thank you.
Are there any other nominations for secretary? Okay, and then treasurer. I personally would like to nominate Phyllis for treasurer. Is there anyone that would second that?
Second it. I second that.
Phyllis, do you accept your nomination for treasurer? Oh, she would have to type it. How do I pull that back up? And where's the chat screen? Has she responded?
No. Oh.
I see someone nodding their head yes.
She said yes.
But she said yes. Okay. Wonderful. Are there any other nominations for treasurer? Okay. Then we have our nominations. Once again, if anyone has any nominations come next month's meeting before elections, feel free to bring them up. We'll move on to trip reports. Does anyone have any trip reports?
I can talk about caves for a second. Let's see. What day was that? Do you remember?
The 13th?
So on the 13th, yeah, last week we, me, Sally, and Colin went to Deep Cave for rad tracks. We started about 8:30 in the morning and got home at around 10 p.m. at night. So it was a very long day. But if anyone ever wants to, take a ride out to Deep Cave for some volunteering whenever things are kind of more normal, I'd be interested in driving you out there. and bringing the cave up for you. So yeah, I think that'd be good. But anyways, we were at the cave for a very short amount of time as far as doing the rad track swap. But you know, for Deep Cave, it's a very pretty cave. Never been. It's nice to see the wonderland of formations, and the off-roading's a lot of fun too if you don't really do that kind of thing a lot. So that's what I got.
Cool. Thanks, Gabe. Any other trip reports?
Well, I went to Chimney Cave with Brian Antshall a couple days after that for radon. That was fun.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Got trip to Deep and one to Chimney. Any other reports?
This last weekend, Jen and I Jen took several Colorado cavers, Derek Bristol and Aaron Vergrilli, to Sentinel, to Shield City, and also to Hell Below. That traverse in Shield City, that's something. That is non-trivial.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm glad I wore my brown pants.
That sounds like a great trip.
It was awesome. It was like a 12-hour trip, roughly. So, good times.
Huh. Thanks for sharing. Any other trip reports?
I've got one for Hidden.
Okay.
So we went in on the 9th, 5 of us, to see if we could identify any possible matches in the pile that was in the upper section that Jen had told us about, and we ended up finding 11 matches after we laid them all out on the tarp. And so, we're going to be going back on the 30th. I think Colin's going to be on that trip, and to epoxy the matches either to the ceilings or to the floor. There's several stalagmites that we found matches to too. So it was a very, very rewarding trip. I didn't think we'd find that many the first time we went. It was really a reconnaissance trip. But the trip to the cave was nice and sunny, and when we came out, it was almost freezing fog. And so it was that same night on the way home, we experienced snow from Roswell all the way up to home where I live in Deike, and we had 6 inches by the time I got home. So it was quite a snowstorm, but a very rewarding trip, and we're going to be going back several times for some repair work there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other trip reports?
Colin and Dwayne have joined me for some more trips in the different BLM caves. Had some nice, tight, crawly stuff, which was super fun. I'm sure Colin agrees. And Dwayne and I also went and looked for the rattlesnake in the entrance to Dry Cave and didn't find it. So we went in and so that I could start familiarizing myself with that cave. But yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking going in and out of the entrance, since every other time I've been there was a big old rattlesnake. So not this time.
I think last time we went and encountered the snake, wasn't it in the summertime, or at least warm out?
Yeah, and it was still there when I went again later. And Dwayne actually got a picture of it. He found where it was. So I sent him in first when we went this last week, and he did a good job looking and didn't find it.
Good job, Rose. You think it's possible it might be just the home for it and during the warm season?
I would assume so. It seems like, and Stan said that like they pretty much always had a rattlesnake, because I talked to him about it. And there's 2 yucca branches or something like on either side of the ledges, so that there's one, I guess, so that you can pick up on your way in to fend off a snake if needed, and then there's one farther into the cave, so as you come back to the entrance area, there's the stick there to help you. fend off the snake if needed. We're assuming they seem very strategically placed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But yeah, that's a cool cave, and Stan was the cartographer for it, but he kind of wanted to give up that project when he moved away. And I know he gave all the notes to Rod, so I really need to just bug Rod and see if Rod will start doing cartography and if he'd want to do any survey trips. So that's that.
All right.
Cool.
Any other trip reports? All right. Any trips in the future? Any trips coming up? All right. Well, as always, if anyone has anything they'd like to mention to the grotto before the next meeting, you can put it on the Facebook page or send out an email or send it to one of us and we can get it sent out. But are there any objections to concluding the meeting?
Nope.
Okay. Then I will bid you adieu and thank you all for coming to the January meeting. Next one will be February 18th. Thank you all for coming out. This was an enjoyable one.
Very good. Good job.
Night, everybody.
Yeah, I'll hang if anyone wants to chat about anything, but otherwise,
Good night.
everyone came out.
I'm tired from caving.
Catch y'all later.
See ya.